the population of the novels of the world does not quite match the population of the entire world. Novelists tend to be more interested in people who have difficulty, whether they overcome it or not. It's what we're here for. Yeah. Just to look at the people. And it's also true, I think, that everybody's looking at Rihanna, at Lady Gaga, at, God forbid, Donald Trump. Everybody's already looking at those people. Only the novelists are looking at that guy in the street, that guy sitting in the park. And somebody has to look at him.
Mladić koji besciljno hoda Central Parkom, domaćica koja svoju glad za životom pokušava da utoli čitanjem, muzičar koji ne uspeva da pronađe onu pravu notu i čitava galerija junaka koji su se razboleli od sopstvenog poraza. Samo su neke od tema koje su Majklu Kaningemu, majstoru intimističkih prizora i postmodernog izraza, donele uspeh i slavu. Rođen 1952. u Cincinnatiju u državi Ohio, Majkl Kaningem odrastao je u Kaliforniji, završio studije engleske književnosti na Stanford univerzitetu, a danas predaje kreativno pisanje na Yale-u. Sredinom 80-ih počinje da objavljuje prozu. Naslov Dom na kraju sveta širom mu otvara vrata Njujorškog literarnog univerzuma, a roman Sati, koji 1999. biva ovenčan Pulitzerovom nagradom, pozicionira ga u vrh savremene američke, ali i svetske proze. Slede Dok ne padne noć, Snežna kraljica, Divlji labud. Autor urbanog senzibiliteta, Majkl Kaningem iscrtava intimne prostore, slobode, ludila, stvaranja, usamljenosti, bolesti, homoseksualnosti, ljubavi. Sve to na nestvarnoj pozadini Njujorka, u čijem ritmu pulsira njegova proza.
Majkl, I'm really happy to meet you in your apartment in New York. This place is a very special place of yours. So
yes.
That's a place?
Yeah. Yes. This place, this little apartment, I have had since I came to New York 25 years ago. It's, as anyone watching us speaking can't know, but it's 6 flights of stairs.
Yes.
Thank you for climbing 6 flights of stairs. It's small and dark, which makes it a less than perfect apartment, but a perfect studio to work in.
It's perfect because everything you wrote here.
Everything, literally everything, everything except my very first novel I wrote here, yes.
Okay, and
everything over the last 25 years.
This place keeps a lot of secrets, I should say.
Yeah,
Secrets?
Don't tell.
Mysteries?
Tell. No. These walls could speak, but fortunately they can't.
But in fact, that's here that you became a writer?
Here? I wouldn't say that I became... I suppose, yes. I wanted to be a writer before I came here. I moved to New York thinking it would be a better place to be a writer. I grew up in Los Angeles, where most people write for the movies.
Yes.
Or television, and I thought I would like to move to New York, where maybe I'll meet somebody who's read a novel all the way through. So I came here, and I had been writing. Back in California, I traveled a little bit, but when I settled in here, I suppose you could say that was when I felt really serious about it. That was when it felt not just like a romance, a youthful romance, but like the work I wanted I hoped to do with my life.
You were not born in New York, but you're a New York writer. Because I have impression there is interaction between your prose and the city.
Sure,
and
sure.
Where do those connections come from?
It's actually very simple. I write quite specifically about New York because I live in New York. I don't write about New York only because I love New York. I write about New York because I know New York. I think that one of the less discussed purposes of fiction is as part of the historical record. We have histories and biographies to teach us certain things about Moscow in the 19th century. But we have Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Chekhov and others to tell us what it was like to spend a Tuesday afternoon in Moscow in 1862. What did it sound like? What did it smell like? And really, it's up to the novelists to record that.
You were born in Ohio, and you spent your childhood in Ohio. It's
we
North
left
America.
we left Ohio when I was so small. I don't remember it at all.
But what was your childhood like? The childhood?
My childhood, I've always wished that I had a more dramatic or interesting childhood. I could make one up, but the truth is, I had if I say an ordinary childhood, so it wasn't dramatic, but it was incredibly privileged. And within its small sphere of privilege, ordinary. A nice little house in the suburbs, a Chevrolet, you know.
So you were ordinary happy child.
No child is happy. No child is happy. I think it was Freud who said children are unhappy most of the time. Freud was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about that. But it was not a traumatized childhood. You know, I know a number of writers, and many of us seem to be some kind of mutations. We don't really know.
Mutations?
Well, because there's nothing in our backgrounds to suggest that we would grow up to be writers. We just lived in little houses, in little towns. And every now and then, one of the children in one of those little houses, in one of those little towns, wants to be a writer. No one knows why.
But I guess you were reading a lot. And you were reading fairy tales, I guess.
Well, like so many people, I started out being read to. My mother would read me fairy tales and other things, but I loved fairy tales, and we read every night. I was like a heroin addict. Like more stories. I wore the poor woman out.
Yeah. And that's why you wrote The Wild Swan.
Most of us are safe. If you're not a delirious dream the gods are having, if your beauty doesn't trouble the constellations, nobody's gonna cast a spell on you. No one wants to transform you into a beast or put you to sleep for 100 years. The wraith, disguised as a pixie, isn't thinking of offering you 3 wishes with doom hidden in them like a razor in a cake. Most of us can be counted on to manage our own undoings. Vengeful entities seek only to devastate the rarest, the ones who have somehow been granted not only bower and trumpet, but comeliness that startles the birds in the trees, coupled with grace, generosity, and charm so effortless as to seem like ordinary human qualities. Who wouldn't want to fuck these people up?
In your latest novel, Wild Swan, you took some fairy tales from your childhood and you modernized them. You put them in the present day. So did you want to have a kind of dialogue with the young Majkl, with your childhood?
I've been trying to get young Majkl on the phone for years. He doesn't pick up.
Really? How does it sound?
I can't get through to him. You know, my versions of the fairy tales have modern elements, but they're a sort of mix. What I wanted them to be was not contemporary versions so much as I wanted them taken out of time.
And they're very cruel. For example, Crazy Old Lady, she lives completely alone.
Oh no, Crazy Old Lady has a happy ending. She gets what she wants.
She lives completely alone, that Crazy Old Lady, and a young couple of psychopaths, Hansel and Gretel, they arrive, they eat her candy house, and they kill her. So you don't think it's cruel?
Here's what's going on in that story. It's my take on Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
It's about getting older. The witch in Hansel and Gretel had been a desirable young woman, and then she got older and older, and no one paid any attention to her anymore. And what she really wants is to be desired, is to be eaten. She doesn't really want to eat children. She wants someone to eat her. And she's afraid she's too old to be edible anymore. And the happy ending is that she finally finds two desperate children who will do that, who will eat her, and that's what she wants. They're perverse, they're not cruel.
Yeah, but I'm not convinced. She's happy with this end. I'm not convinced.
They're not meant to be cruel, they're meant to be true. And life can be difficult, and sometimes getting what we want can look like punishment.
You write a lot about the human nature of all time. And in Jack and the Beanstalk, you write about people who never have enough. It's a story about our time?
Again, it's a story about a particular character who is like many people who just wants more. This is not true of, nothing is true of every person, of course, but many of us want more money, more love, more youth, more of whatever it is we think we don't have enough of. We know the story. Jack climbs this magic beanstalk. There's a castle in the clouds owned by a giant.
And he robs the giant.
He robs the giant. He goes 3 times.
Yes.
He takes the giant's gold. He takes a hen that lays golden eggs, and then he takes a magic harp. And what we may not remember from the story is that each time Jack climbs the beanstalk, the giant has a wife.
Yes.
And the wife lets Jack into the castle.
Why does she do that?
Well, that's the question.
Why?
That was what I wanted to know when I was 6.
Yeah.
And my mother just kind of lit a cigarette and said, well, because, I don't know.
Okay.
But now that I'm not 6, I think back to that story and wonder, what's going on in that marriage?
So, what would...
Why would a wife want to see her husband robbed over and over and over again?
And what should be the response?
I think, in my version,
yes.
It's because she wants to see him ruined, and she can't do it herself.
She wants her husband
She wants her husband to be brought down, and she needs someone else to do it for her. That's the point. I wanted to sort of marry the magical elements of these fairy tales to what actually happens between human beings, which is often left out in the original fairy tales. I was forever asking my mother, why did they do that? And now I'm trying to answer my own questions.
Yes. And perhaps that you gave the answer in the novel By Nightfall. Don't you think? There is a middle-aged couple who live together for years.
Yeah.
And there is a sudden arrival of a beautiful young man. those couple, they have their first panic about aging and about mortality. And the arrival of the young man changes everything in their life. So there are, you write about those underground currents.
I think writing about the undercurrents in everyday life is a novelist's job. That's what we're here to do. And I think that is part of why we are sometimes irritating to other people. Because what we're saying always is, oh no, it's more complicated than that. It's not what you think it is. That witch, that was a happy ending.
Yeah.
It's not what you think. That's what we do. And sure, in that book, and by nightfall, it's a happy enough couple, been together a long time, and they are visited by the woman's much younger brother. And the husband, the man, develops a sort of fixation on this
Erotic
boy.
fixation for the young boy, yes.
It's erotic, but it's not lecherous, if you know what I mean. It's not exactly sexual. It's about the boy as a beautiful object. I didn't want it to be a novel about a closeted gay man who falls in love with his wife's brother. That seemed too simple. I wanted it to be about an essentially heterosexual man who falls in love not only with the kind of perfect beauty of this boy, who is almost like an Etruscan vase to this guy, and I wanted him to fall in love with a certain sense of his wife reincarnated when she was young.
That arrival changes everything in their life.
Sure.
So, and you realize that they knew nothing about each other.
Right.
How well do we know people we live with? How much do we know about their real desires
that's a big
and their needs?
Yeah. When I write about people, couples in this case, who are troubled, whose lives are shaken up, it's not because I don't believe that there are happy couples who are doing just fine, but we don't need to read books about them. One wants to feel less alone in reading a novel, and I can't think of anything that would make me feel more alone than a novel about a happy little family to whom nothing but good things happen.
Really?
I'd be so depressed reading that book. Look at your skin. Look at your lips. Look at the petals of your eyelids. I'm going to stop talking now. You can lower the lid. I'm the luckiest man in the world. I'm not talking anymore. I'm going into the zone. 12 minutes, tops, I promise. Shh. Sleep like death. Before I even existed. For you, I mean. When I was, okay, I like thinking this way. When I was a dream you were having. When I was a premonition. When I was perfect. Because I didn't exist. When I was pure possibility. And I really hope this isn't weird. When you were immaculate and entirely strange. And the most perfect and beautiful creature I'd ever seen. Before I lifted the lid, I mean, and kissed you for the first time.
I like very much your version of the Snow White.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, because in your version, the prince, he rescued the Snow White, but he doesn't really know what to do with. He realized that he prefers look at her asleep.
Snow White, the prince and Snow White are a particular kind of story about first falling in love. about that first kiss, which you never get again. You only kiss someone for the first time once. Prince, in the story of Snow White, comes upon a beautiful girl who appears to be dead and lifts the lid of this glass casket and kisses her and brings her back to life. And then they go off and get married. But
it's not anymore so
interesting. He misses that first kiss.
Yeah, yes,
you know, you're never going to bring somebody back to life with a kiss again. And so he has a fetish about it.
But my question was, when we love, who do we love, in fact?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I actually think many novels are about that very question. Yes, you love, but who is this person that you love? Who do you love? I think many of us sort of spend our whole lives discovering and rediscovering who it is we love. And we change. I mean, I think in many cases, that's what keeps a marriage alive. This sense of a little bit of mystery about the other person, this sense that you know this person, of course, intimately, but there's something you don't quite know yet. And that keeps it going. And then it's 60 years later. And you still wonder, you know, I think you're great. Yeah, you get on my nerves sometimes, but I think you're remarkable. And I'm not exactly... Can you tell me one more time who you are? And gone. It's not a bad life.
Yeah. You write a lot about love, I think.
Sure.
As your reader.
Sure, yeah.
You write about heterosexual love, about homosexual love.
Mm-hmm.
So how could you draw the line between heterosexual and homosexual love? Is it the same or not?
I think
in its nature.
It's much more the same than it is different. Certainly, in my experience, a relationship between two men or two women or a man and a woman is what it is. It depends on who those two people are. It has, in my experience, nothing to do with their genders. The only difference that means anything to me in the sense of whether a couple is heterosexual or homosexual is the homosexual couple, things have changed a great deal, but the homosexual couple is still treated a little differently in the world. Your experience at home is
even
the same,
in America?
But when you go out, even it's subtle, even in America. Yeah. Not so much in New York, but there's a whole country outside of New York where it would still be dangerous for two men who are married to hold hands in public. It's not, the revolution isn't over yet.
And there are trios in your novels.
It's true, yeah.
Three women in the hours, two brothers and the dying bride,
and
the Snow Queen and the couple and the young brother in the nightfall. So the number of three is very playful for you.
Yeah.
I think it's something...
Well, three keeps turning up, from the Holy Trinity to three acts in a Shakespeare play. We keep finding the number three, and I think it's at least partly because three is the first really interesting number. One is just one. Two can only be symmetrical. Where you can draw.
But it's good to be symmetrical.
It's
Doesn't it?
But it's not dramatically interesting. It's good for your life.
Okay.
You could take this back with you, and you'd be thousands of miles away. But the two books you could draw a straight line between them. You add a third, and the possibilities become endless. It's dramatically more interesting when there are three.
And your families are not the real biological families.
No.
Your families, it's interesting. The people choose their families.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things I think most of us who write fiction do is we write about what we've seen. We write about the world in which we live. And I happen to live and to have lived for quite a while in a world full of, shall we say, non-traditional families. Whether they're...
But your family was traditional family.
My family was quite traditional, yeah.
But didn't want that family. You wanted to find your own.
Yeah, I wanted to find my own. I did. So, but I am interested in unorthodox families. I know I'm not alone. I think it's partly because some of us are finding that our biological families don't know us well enough. And we have to leave. We love them. I hope we love them. We should call them. But we may need to be with other people who know us better. If you are even something as simple as gay, and your parents can't accept that, you should be compassionate toward them. You should understand that this is too difficult for them, but you can't live with them. You have to leave and find people who love you as you are. As he walked through the park, Barrett lifted his heavy head and looked up, and there it was. A pale aqua light, translucent, a swatch of veil. Star high, no, higher, lower than the stars, but higher than a spaceship hovering above the treetops. It may or may not have been slowly unfurling, densest at its center, trailing off at its edges into lacy spurs and spirals. Barrett thought that it must be a freakish southerly appearance of the aurora borealis. Not exactly a common sight over Central Park, but as he stood, a pedestrian in coat and scarf, saddened and disappointed, but still regular as regular, standing on a stretch of lamplit ice. As he looked up at the light, he believed. He knew that as surely as he was looking at the light was looking back at him.
In The Snow Queen, you depict two brothers who live together. There is a dying bride.
Yeah.
And one of your characters, he has a vision.
Yeah.
A celestial vision. So what do you do when you have a vision on the sky and you don't believe in God?
Well, that's the question in the book. What do you do?
What do you do? Yes,
What do you do? He's not sure what to do. He doesn't know. I wanted him to, this character in the book, to see something inexplicable, something celestial, something that suggests a power beyond just human power. But I didn't want it to be the sort of traditional Catholic Annunciation in which the angel appears and sort of tells you what to do. The trouble with Barrett's vision is it doesn't tell him anything, except that it's there, and he has to figure it out.
I was talking about those two brothers. The first one, he has vision. He doesn't really know what to do with.
Yeah.
And the other one, who is musician, he would like to have a vision, but he can't.
That's exactly
Yes.
right. I'm always
So,
happy when people get the point.
yeah,
Yeah. Because that's the sort of dichotomy in that novel. There's somebody who didn't want a vision and got one,
Yes.
and
And
somebody
the other-
desperately searching for a vision that won't come.
Yeah.
Bingo.
I think I like very much in your heroes. They have talent and creativity, but they're not successful. You don't like winners. I should say.
Oh, I have
No,
I have
you
nothing.
just
I have
said-
nothing against winners. I have nothing against winners. I think they're in the minority. But I've always been especially interested in people who have some kind of gift, work hard at it, and don't get or do not become rich and famous. And I was going to say, I don't know why that is, but I guess maybe I do a little bit. Now, believe me, this is not false modesty. The experience of writing a book, of writing a novel, always feels a little bit like a failure, even if the book turns out pretty well, is well received. You always had a better book in mind. You should. You should have a better book in mind. That is part of what keeps you growing. That is part of what makes the novels come to life, is that reaching for the perfect novel that you can't write. So I guess I identify. I mean, I've been very lucky and I'm more successful than I'd ever imagined being, but I do identify with that sense of having worked very hard and not quite done what you'd hoped to do. But really, every writer I know feels the same way. This is not just me. We all have this ideal book.
Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself.
Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself.
Sally, I think I'll buy the flowers myself.
Your first really great and huge success, that's the novel The Hours.
Yeah.
You took the novel of Virginia Woolf and the character of Virginia Woolf, and you made your own novel. So it was a great courage.
It took real courage. I was nervous about it. Yeah, I was. Mrs. Dalloway was the first great book I ever read, and it mattered so much to me. It sort of, most of us who care about books, whether we remember or not, probably have a first great book. The book, or it may not have been a great book, but the book that really shocked you, the book that shocked you into a life as a reader. Like your first kiss, you know, the book that just came to life for you in a way that no other book had before, and that was Mrs. Dalloway for me. So I sort of wanted to write a book about reading a book. I was afraid that would be boring. And it just evolved gradually. I wanted it to be an homage to Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, but then I realized we don't just need an homage. That's not enough for a book. And it just kept developing until finally it was about these three women. And
Completely different.
yeah, but
Completely
linked.
different.
You know, one is Virginia Woolf. One is the character Virginia Woolf is writing, is inventing. And one of them is a woman in the 1950s who's reading Virginia Woolf.
So there are three different women and three different destinies. But the common point is that this world seems not to be enough for them.
Yeah, each of the women in the Hours wants something, but each of them wants something different. Virginia Woolf hopes to write a great book. Mrs. Brown, Laura Brown, the housewife in the 50s, wants a more satisfying life. She's married into the wrong situation. Clarissa Dalloway really just wants her best friend, the poet, to live, and he's dying. I did not sit at this desk writing the hours thinking this book about 3 depressed, suicidal women is going to be a huge bestseller. I was not thinking that. Tyler lights a cigarette. He goes to the window, cracks it open, blows the smoke screen out into the air shaft. His exhalation is answered by a tickle of frigid air seeping in. Barrett asks, have you listened to the news yet? Nah, I'm a little bit afraid to. Bush was still ahead in the polls at 6. He's not going to win, Tyler says. I mean, there were no fucking weapons of mass destruction. 0. Zip. Tyler knows he can get crazy on the subject, monomaniacal. He can be tiresome about his conviction that if others only saw, if they only understood, there were no weapons of mass destruction and we bombed them anyway. And by the way, he's destroyed the economy. He's squandered something in the neighborhood of $1 trillion.
And in the background of your fiction, of your prose, there is some political events, like presidential elections or economic crisis in the Snow Queen.
Yeah.
So do you think that American fiction today is rather apolitical and non-historical?
I do.
You do?
I do.
Why is that so?
It's strange to me. I think in a capitalist society, in a country that imagines there are not classes, which there are, it seems to be easier for some Americans than it is for some people in other countries to imagine that it doesn't really matter who's running the government, who's really running the government that we don't even know about, who's running the companies, who's shaping our lives. It's possible to feel in the States that it doesn't matter who's in power. And it's difficult to imagine a South American novel or an African novel or an Eastern European novel that's set in a time or place in which the politics are simply immaterial. They may not be central, but they're very much a part of people's lives. And I have wondered for some time why so many American writers just seem to be writing in some political nowhere zone.
Do you feel you live in a non-historical time?
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, there is, of course, we don't need me to point out what a new country America is, how it is sort of more possessed of the idea of continually reinventing itself than I think older countries are. But I also think America is in bad shape right now. Look at the presidential elections. Look at all, you know, a country that is seriously considering electing Donald Trump president is not a country that's in good shape, I think, by definition.
But you're right about the whole generation, new generation of Americans who are not in such a good shape.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, again...
So what picture of America do you want to suggest to your readers?
Oh, and I suppose this sort of goes back to my interest in characters who are not famous or rich, that...
They don't make part of the American dream, in fact.
Yeah, that the American dream is not working out the way it was supposed to.
Yes.
That the American dream favors the few over the many. In America, just under 100 people control more than half the resources. That's not the American dream as it was explained to us when we were children. And so, yeah, I guess I am more interested in the billions of people who own the other half.
Yeah. For the end, I would like to ask you something about writing. You say writing is an optimistic act. So what do you mean by that?
Anyone who writes a novel is performing a fundamental act of optimism, because that writer, in writing the novel, is hoping that there will be a future, that the future will be inhabited by people who want to read novels. Because, you know, a novel takes, it takes a long time to write, it takes a long time to publish. When you sit down to write a novel, you are writing that novel for a world 5 or 10 years ahead, in the future.
Yes.
And I think that is not an act that would be performed by someone in despair, period.
Yeah.
Your novel may be dark, your novel may be pessimistic, but you wrote it, didn't you?
Yeah, but...
And that means you believe that there will be a future and that there will be someone who wants to read this book.